Briahna Joy Gray had a conversation with Francesca Fiorentini. She was previously a part of TYT and, has kind of ventured out on her own. And she also has her own show, and she was a journalist before TYT as well. She heavily, she supports the Democratic Party. And I don't know if she would call herself a Democrat, but I know she supports the Democratic Party, right? Like, she was trying to make the case for Kamala Harris, even though I don't think that would have been her first choice, right? Like that type of thing. And I think that what Bree may be trying to do is trying to find a way to unite people on the left, or people that agree with at least progressive said policies, to try to have some type of unity, because there isn't. Like, I mean, there's definitely division. I can get into that a little bit later, but there's definitely division. And it seems like Bree is extending that olive branch. I thought it was interesting, pretty early on in this conversation. One of the things that Francesca brought up, not Bree, was third parties. Is it possible that she may be changing her opinion a little bit on that? Listen to this.
I just don't know, Bree. Like, I really feel like unless someone makes a break to like start a new thing, actually go independent, like is Karine Jean-Pierre saying that AOC should go independent, or that some other leaders should go independent? Because that's an interesting proposal. But, who knows? I got to read the book.
That's a very good question, Fran. I got to tell you, I'm pleasantly surprised to hear you sounding kind of third party curious there. Is this a recent development? Have you been thinking about this way for a while? Was Gaza sort of a tipping point, or the 2024 election a tipping point? Or am I just out of the loop and you've been sort of on this sort of path for a while?
Well, look, I think, I'm someone who was, radicalized by the fallout of 9/11, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I was an anti-war organizer then, very much outside the political, sort of official political spectrum there, very much on the left. And I think 2018 changed that, obviously, with, the election of the squad and people actually speaking to the real concerns of, me, my cohort, my friends, working people, people of color, people who've been colonized, oppressed, invaded, all that. And so and of course, by the Bernie movement and the Bernie moment. And so that was like oh, hey, let's take electoralism seriously. And I think that was a good turn. And I think the Biden years plus the 2024 loss is a reminder that this party doesn't want to change, that actually outside pressure can never be given up. And the attempts to sort of like, again, in the 2020 election cycle, the attempts from groups like Sunrise and others to really like get their demands through were valiant and important, but that clearly they were also demobilizing, and clearly the Democratic Party didn't deliver. And so I'm having a little bit of a, if I will call it this, like a re-radicalization of where I've always been, but where I think that for a brief moment we thought maybe these people were not only serious about any of their values, but also about winning by leading with those values. And man, I think it's been a really tough few months. And I'm like, how many fucking times do we have to see the DNC do the wrong thing? Obviously I'm going back to like not choosing Jesse Jackson, all like, you don't want to win. And all of the shit about like people of color and this and that. And, no, all of it's bullshit. It's bullshit. And so, so that's where I'm at, is like a little bit jury's still out. And I don't support, like, I've been openly critical of Jill Stein. I'm not a big Jill Stein person. I really think that third party candidacies need to be either long-term projects from the ground up, or again, if someone with import and a lot of following made a break, this is the time, in my opinion.
Pause. So a couple of things to say here, right? Like, yeah, she's right. She was very, very critical of Jill Stein, right? And part of the problem is when people say, well, third parties can't win or they need this momentum. It doesn't help when people who have like one of the larger platforms constantly attack those people instead of let's bring this person on and have said conversation with them, right? Because at that point, you're working against any other like alternative and still trying to work within the duopoly. And I don't know about everybody else, and people have different growth periods, but I am past that point. And I played this duopoly game. I played this with AOC and Bernie Sanders and all that. And I really thought like we had a chance. But we're talking, it's been since technically 2015, when Bernie was running the first time. It's been since 2015. And at this point in time, it's been almost 10 years. So the reason why we have not seen those big wins for progressive policies on the national level is because of the corruption and corporate interests in electoral politics. And what has been very clear to me is that until you get the money out, you don't get the corruption out. If you cannot remove corporate money from electoral politics, or at least let's say the Democratic Party, you can't get the corruption out. I want everybody to understand that, right? So cash equals corruption. C equals C. Now, what was also interesting that she said there, talking about third parties need to do more from the ground up. It's interesting because she's in California. Guess who's running for governor of California? That's a third party candidate. Butch Ware. And I mean, it doesn't even have to be Butch, but I mean, it's like in California, you are living in a state where you actually have a third party candidate running for governor. Why not bring Butch Ware on your show and interview him? That's what I don't get from a lot of the people who are still stuck in the Bernie, like AOC camp, are still trying to work within the Democratic Party. And again, like I said, some of this is audience capture. I told you guys before. So that's what I don't get. You want to criticize third parties for not succeeding, but you also don't want to talk to these people. It's like you want to criticize them for not getting there or reaching a benchmark, but you also don't want to bring them on your show and introduce them to your audience as well. You know what I mean? So it's like, I used to say this like when I still worked in education, it's like, you guys want to complain about the students that are underperforming, but you're not giving them the tools and the resources that they need to perform better. And you want to point fingers at the end. That's kind of what it reminds me of, right? So I was surprised to hear she said, well, the jury's still out. And she's kind of looking, and she said this party doesn't want to change. And she's right about that. The Democratic Party does not want to change. And I told you, again, why would they want to if they belong to corporate interests, just like the Republicans? It's the same team. You can't, you're trying to get a team to split. And teams, for the most part, don't do that, especially teams that are beholden to corporate interests. They're not going to do that. That's how you end up there. So again, even the talking point, and this is why, again, I walked away from a lot of the progressive like shows, because they really want you to continue doing the same strategy that you've been doing for 10 years, when at this point, we could have built something phenomenal. Or we could have built up the Green Party. All these years of this working with inside the Democratic Party. So it's like they don't want to move really beyond. It's like they're interested in it, but at the same time, wait till you hear what she says later, who she would vote for in 2028, right? Let's bring in Bree's take here.
The Biden term and the first 2 years in particular were the sort of nail in the coffin for me. That proved that Democrats were unwilling to do anything with power when they had it, and that they were constitutionally committed because of their donors, but committed because of the structure of the party.
Yep.
To acting against the interests of working people and the people in the movement that I had joined.
Right.
and that as tough it was going to be to build up a third party, that was more likely to be successful than changing the Democratic Party. And Gaza just further, like, you know, put so many nails in the coffin that looked like, you know, it's made of metal.
And I think it's like, that really sealed the deal. And I think it also sealed the deal on like wanting to win. I mean, it's really gross to make sort of like the strategic political argument around Gaza, because it is just a moral gaping wound for any party that claims to believe in human rights. But really, you're going to lose. This is massive. It's not just people on the left. It's not just students who believe there's a genocide happening, right? We see it. It's impacting people who do not follow politics, don't really care, don't know, maybe even voted for Trump, and are like, this is awful. It's like the lane is there. And again, coming from the anti-war movement, circa 2003, the lane's always been there. And so it's very upsetting when even someone like Marjorie Greene takes up this, in my opinion, bad faith and bullshit mantle of isolationism, because, you know, it's like, oh, let's redirect militarism to immigrants here and the border. But like, the anti-war lane has always been there, and Bernie came the closest to really putting it on a national stage. But since then, Democrats have not only walked away from the anti-war mantle, but even they're so rudderless right now, Brie, like they can't even remember like why Obama was good in the small ways he was good. You know, it's like, yeah. Multiracial democracy, building a better future. Can you just say that line? Are we so far out of the Obama years? And I guess we are. And also so stupid. And I think, you know, when you see someone like Senator Ruben Gallego going and fundraising with Mark Andreessen, you're like, oh no, we're fucking cooked, yo. Like they want their money. They see the oligarchies throwing down with MAGA, and yet they're like, well, maybe the oligarchy will like me too. And it's not only a way you're losing both. You're losing the base, and you're going to lose the oligarchy ultimately when push comes to shove.
They're not going to lose the oligarchy because, again, like I said, they belong to these lobby interest groups, and they support corporate interests. So they're not going to lose the oligarchy. So the problem that I run into, and again, I think Bree is trying to establish some type of, you know, unity here. I applaud her for doing that. Like I said, if it's someone that's going to be the one to do it, it would be her, because she's able to talk to people across, you know, like she is cool with people in different groups, right? Like that type of thing. And a lot of people know her, right? So Francesca knows, you know, who she is pretty familiar with her, that type of thing. And because she was part of the Bernie campaign, etc. Right? So, like I said, she would be the one to do it. I think for me, where it's interesting that Gaza is brought up. It's interesting that Barack Obama's, you know, multiracial democracy is brought up, because see, this is exactly the problem that I had. You can't sit up here and say over and over that, you know, we need to change the Democratic Party and it needs to be different, to go back to the party supporting the people, but then go and give a hand clap for Barack Obama when we're talking about anti-war and we're talking about Gaza and we're talking about multiracial. For example, Barack Obama didn't do shit for the Black community. See, this is another thing I noticed in particular with like a lot of the progressive, like, you know, YouTubers. They only really want to go so far. They want to talk about multiracial and, you know, coalition, but when it comes down to giving the Black community what is owed to Black people in this country, giving us, you know, what we were robbed of, the neighborhoods that were burned down of Black communities in this country, giving back what is owed, they never want to go that far. Multiracial democracy, that's just something I would hear like a Hillary Clinton supporter say. That don't mean shit to me. This is what I was saying. This is why more of us push back on it, because you guys just want, I feel like Francesca wants that to just be enough. And she's an activist and an organizer. So I know she knows better. She's right in California. You know what else happens in California? Ballot initiatives. California is a ballot measure state. Why so much focus on just what's happening on the national level when there are things that have been accomplished in California, in your state, via ballot measure? Why? If you believe in these progressive policies and you really want to fight for them and things like Medicare for all, why tell people to vote for Kamala Harris? Because you can't criticize said oligarchy and point to the oligarchy in the Republican Party, but then still tell people, well, vote for the corporate Democrat because they're not Donald Trump. You're still supporting the oligarchy. And that's the way a lot of these shows within the progressive media space work. And that was the problem that I had. And that's why you don't see me talk to many of them. That's why you don't see me on their shows, because I know what they're doing. And so it's easier for them to point to me and say, oh, she's secret right wing or whatever. Yeah, I'm right wing. I voted third party. Like, give me a freaking break, because I know what they're doing. Because once you establish like that progressive audience, everybody in the audience is not progressive. You got some liberals over in there too. And then it's like, now we got to try to keep them in. So we still got to push through the Democratic Party in order to maintain said audience. I mean, I know what they're doing. And one of the things I think that people appreciate about Brie is like, she wasn't willing to do that. She wasn't willing to vote for Biden. She wasn't willing to vote for Kamala Harris. Like, she's like, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to support, vote Jill Stein, etc. And I don't think people understand the way that we were smeared. I don't think people understand the way that people like me and my comrades at RBN, JB Rome, Nick, the way that Bree, the way that a lot of us that backed and supported Jill Stein instead of voting for Kamala, I don't think people understand the extent of smears that were delivered towards us by Democrat operatives who, by the way, after the election was over, never heard from these people again. Because we were willing to hold the line. The reason why the progressive policies have not made a dent on the national level is because part of the progressive media that energizes that base does not hold the line. If the people in the movement are not willing to hold a line, and you're willing to say, I know I told you to push back against the oligarchy and the corporate establishment, but vote for this corporate establishment candidate. If you can't hold the line when there's a genocide involved, you're not really trying to change anything. And that's how I felt. And I don't give a damn. I don't think, even if it wasn't Trump, I really believe this, guys. Even if it wasn't Donald Trump and it was someone else who was the Republican candidate, I still think they would have done this. So a lot of it is audience capture. Now we're going to move on to the next part here. No, I think we finished that part. Yeah, we're going to go into the next part here because there's a couple parts that I want to get into. Yeah, 25. Let's go to this part as well.
Democratic Party postures itself as like, we care about you, actually. You don't get to be the we care about you, actually. We have the soul of the nation, actually, party. When you have a demonstrated ability to go from basically shaming everybody over not being where you are with respect to something like trans issues to being like, F them trans folks anyway. And during Pride Month.
Yeah. Well, and this is, I think, maybe where we might disagree. And it's a point that I think is an interesting one because, I say what I'm saying now. And if and when Democrats are running Pete Buttigieg, I'm going to support, I will vote for Pete Buttigieg, and I'll tell the people who watch my show to do that. However,
you see what I'm talking about? How do you go from supporting people like AOC and these progressive policies to vote for Kamala Harris, even though I'm heavily against the genocide, to, I think I might be, the verdict's out and, we need a third party. The time for it is now, to I'm going to vote for Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg is corporate. Pete Buttigieg is a McKinsey lab rat. You guys know this guy was created. Do people not understand what he comes from? I know Francesca does because they had these conversations on TYT when he ran in 2020. She knows exactly who Pete Buttigieg is. But now it's like, well, if it's him, I'm going to vote for Pete Buttigieg. Why? You live in California. This is another thing. I'm going to tell my viewers to vote for Pete Buttigieg. Why? Why? Weren't you just complaining about said oligarchy? So why would you tell your viewers to vote for someone who's a part of said oligarchy? Pete Buttigieg was the candidate. For those who don't know, Pete Buttigieg was the 2020 Democrat primary candidate who had a fundraiser in a wine cave. That was Pete. Very corporate. So you can't have it both ways. Everyone repeat this with me. You can't have it both ways. You can't say, don't support corporate oligarchy, and then say, support these candidates who are corporate and support the oligarchy. You can't have it both ways. You can't say that you're pro-worker and you're for the people, and at the same time say, my person didn't get the nomination. Vote for this person who's anti-worker and not for the people. What? That's why the progressive movement failed. That's why. Not willing to hold the line. Trump was able to take over the Republican Party because guess what? Trump voters were willing to hold the line. When Nikki Haley was shoved in their face, did they vote for Nikki Haley in the Republican primary? No, most of her votes came from independents and she still lost. They were willing to hold the line. Wait till you hear the reason why she wants to vote for him.
Because I think it's a defensive mechanism for me. Like, to me, general elections, again, it's like flossing and paying taxes. Nobody wants to do it. You got to do it. It's like just, and you don't think about it. Just flick the shit in your teeth away, do it. And that's.
She lives in California. Am I the only one that is seeing the logic to this? She lives in California. California is a ballot initiative state. No, you don't. You actually can sit your ass on the couch. You really don't have to. Or if you do go vote, you can vote for those ballot measures. You really don't have to pick. And this is another thing that really bothered me. If you live in a state like California and you're like, oh, well, the verdict's out about third party or independent party, the fuck do you care? You live in California. You could have voted third party if you wanted to, but that wasn't the goal. I got to tell you, and I said this before, I got to tell you guys, if I could do it all over again, if I could go back to 2015, I would have never donated to this shit. I would have never donated to Bernie. I would have never donated to AOC. I would have never participated in any of this match, knowing what I know now.
You can't win on a, like, Francesca's telling her podcast audience that they should do this defensively, because that's what I did with Kamala Harris. And it's on the candidate to actually make their platform appealing and actually authentic and believable. And as you said, ideologically strident. So, but I do feel like because the brand is like, hey, it's like, whatever it is, it's like the Lockheed Martin with like a rainbow flag. It's like, I understand that is in practice the same, but when it comes to pressure, the door is open. It's like the person, again, like these representatives who maybe aren't good on Palestine, but they're good on immigration. There's a window there. There's a way to say, hey, can we be morally consistent and stop sending, weapons to Israel?
No, there isn't. See, this is where the delusion comes in. And Jesus Christ, I just hope more people wake up to this. Start watching more, diversify your media. No, there isn't. What do you mean there's a window there for them to stop sending weapons to Israel? How is there a window there when AIPAC and Kufi own these parties? Again, it's the same team. Democrats and Republicans bounce off each other. The only way there's a window there is if the Democratic Party is willing not to take corporate money anymore and just be a grassroots party. Then I would say you got that window. But as long as they're both corporate and they belong to big money interests and lobby interest groups, there is no window there. This is the lie, and I'm sorry, and this is the lie that a lot of these commentators, particularly the YouTube commentators that's still trying to push the Democratic Party, this is the lie that they tell their audience. And they have you guys running on this lie for years, and they have them thinking, okay, there's still a chance, there's still a chance. No, if there was still a chance, you think people would have been doing this for 10 years? Bernie twice in a row, that didn't wake people up? How they can just cheat against a candidate and just pull someone out? How they can take, Bernie's votes and give them to Hillary Clinton? Like, things like this, like, no. There really isn't. I'm sorry. I'm not going to be the one to sit here and lie to you and just say, yeah, there's a chance, there's a window. No, there isn't. As long as corporate money is controlling the party, there is no window for you to get them to stop sending weapons to Israel. It does not exist. That's giving people false hope.
Is way more space to operate in than someone who's like, nah, lock every immigrant up and also nuke Palestine. Like, so that's why, I've always felt that it's pressure. It's what gives movements more space. You got to remember when Occupy popped off. Occupy popped off in the middle of an Obama administration. And it was even on the precipice of re-election. And, I remember the reporters would go down there and they'd be like, hey, what do you think about Obama? And they were just like, eye rolls, whatever. Like, we're on some next shit. We're doing this. And I think we saw the ways that when a movement pops off during a Republican administration, i.e. BLM popping off during Trump, tanks are going to get called out. People are going to be disappeared off the streets. People are going to be extrajudicially killed, and not have any due process. That's the difference. And so that's what helped Biden win. Of course, he threw the entire movement that helped him win under the bus. But I think that very stark difference, and we're seeing it now, right? The criminalization of Palestine protesters, it was there under Biden. I'm not saying it wasn't, but it is on a different level under Trump. So that's why I make that utilitarian argument without preciousness, right? I don't feel like I've lost a part of my soul because I've voted defensively. I say I do this. It's part of a broader project. It's part of a broader movement. I'm not even going to think about it.
There is no broader project and broader movement, though. What are you talking about? By the way, if you look at the energy, notice you don't hear anything about the Bernie Sanders AOC oligarchy tour anymore. That was just an immediate response to Donald Trump, winning and all that. And now it's just, what larger move? There is no larger movement for what she is speaking of, unless you are going to align with the corporatist Democrats. So you can't work with the same people that you're trying to punch in the face. You know what I mean? It's like, you can't work side by side with the same people that you're trying to kick out of the party. You play this little game of footsie or whatever with them. You're either in or you're out. And what I think has happened, and I got to be clear about this again, you're not voting defensively if you're a Democrat and you live in California. I'm sorry. The reality is this. You live in California. And then to the other part of this, I am very much taken aback by the number of times where a lot of us that are hosts live in ballot measure states and no focus on local. And she's an activist and an organizer. So why not talk about, and I watched the full thing. I saw the whole interview. It was like an hour and 33 minutes. So I saw the whole thing. As an activist and an organizer, why aren't you talking about any of the wins locally? Why not talk about any of the things that people can do on the ground instead of sitting around for 4 years waiting for the next presidential election? Now, I do mutual aid. I'm not saying she got to go do that. But what I'm saying is, as an activist and organizer, why not talk about the wins that people can get locally instead of just getting people to focus on what they can do in the next 4 years from now for the presidential election? And this is where I got to say this, guys. A lot of it is audience capture. And you see it over and over again. Look, one thing I'll tell you about this show, there's been a number of times where there are things that I have said on this show where people got upset and said they were unsubscribing. And I was like, bye. Number of times. I don't have audience capture on this show. Everybody watching me isn't a liberal. Everybody watching me isn't conservative. Everybody watching me isn't progressive. Everyone watching me isn't post-duopoly. You know, it's a mixture in here. And I think you can see that from some of the polls that I have. But a lot of it is audience capture, because what will happen if she fully abandons the Democratic Party? Now you got an audience, which she mentioned in this interview, it's liberals and progressives that are in her audience. Now you have this audience that may lose interest because you're not pushing the Democratic Party. Because there are some viewers that only want to hear their party side, and that's it. They don't want to hear the support or advocacy for an alternative. They don't want to hear it. They want to exist in an echo chamber. And I think that's a dangerous thing, man. And I got to tell you, I just think a lot of it is audience capture, you know? So this part right here is interesting.
Part of why I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time is because I still feel the sort of like Chinese wall that went down across the left over after Force the Vote.
You're also talking about my people? Did I leave the Chinese wall?
The proverbial,
yes,
proverbial Chinese wall that went down. And I don't like it. I never felt like it was, not only did I feel like it wasn't necessary for folks who disagreed to disagree with the kind of like vehemence that existed at the time. And I know that a lot of it was because of like one person who I think had relationships with folks in a way that I also didn't. And so I kind of let some of that stuff roll off. I don't know. I don't think I was it's not important. Why? The point I'm trying to make is that I never wanted, I felt like it would have been more constructive and there would have been less animosity if we had all continued to talk to each other.
Sure.
And misunderstandings could have been resolved much more quickly. Like the talk that I eventually had with Sam Cedar, which I thought was very constructive, didn't happen until like, I think February, like a month or two, maybe March after Force the Vote. You know, there was no reason for us to be sort of sniping across shows when the left is already so small. And when...
I mean, just like look at, I don't know. I'm not here to be a surrogate for anybody, literally. And I did watch that discussion. I thought it was great. I do want to say, though, that like the strategy of, this is not you, but the strategy of like tweeting at somebody angrily, telling them to go on your show and or do something. And if they didn't, they were all of the following things, like cyberbullying our way to like real change is just like not how we're going to get things done. And it certainly doesn't make you good allies. And I think we need coalitions and allies, and like coalition building is really important. And ask any organizer, that is not how you go about doing it. Do you absolutely do, you know, actions and sit-ins and all this? Yes. But like, again, I still think we're figuring out our dance. We're still figuring out our strategy. I remember having Matthew Smucker on my show. He's a like incredible movement strategist. And he was basically like,
so let's just pause here for a second. So yeah, there is a such thing as coalition building. That is true. However, there's also a such thing as access. Now, I feel like I can say this in a non-biased way because I didn't have a show during Force the Vote. So this is what I saw as a viewer who was sitting on the couch watching this during that time. It seemed like to me that some people took a position not to participate in Force the Vote. Yes, because of, you know, said people involved, but there were a lot of people that participated, that supported Force the Vote and Force the Vote Town Hall. But to be honest with you, once I got, you know, into this, I started to realize a lot of this deals with access. And I think that some of them, like Francesca, and she was still part of TYT at that point, did not want to participate in it because they didn't want to lose access to said politicians. They lost access to those politicians anyway. That's the funny part. When's the last time you saw like squad members go on TYT? See, this is the funny part. See, it's not so much of they were upset. Well, there could be some of this. They were upset because they said that Jimmy was being too harsh on Twitter and stuff like that. And you can feel that way and you can agree with that. However, let's take it a step further. You didn't want to be associated with that harshness because you didn't want to lose access to those politicians. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't have given a damn. A lot of it has to deal with access. And I've had many disagreements. I tell you, look, I don't agree with everybody on everything. I've had disagreements with people, in the space and things like that. And it's kind of like we agree to disagree, on different things. But I do have red lines. And when a red line is crossed, nah, fuck that. You dead to me, son. Like just dead seriously. Right. But a lot of this had to do with access. And this is what I saw. As someone that did not have a show at that time, it was becoming very clear to me that it seemed like the so-called progressive movement was only willing to go so far. In other words, they weren't willing to hold the line. When it came to force the vote, they didn't want to hold the line. When it came to a genocide, they didn't want to hold the line. When it came to Biden wanting to and doing it, increasing more funding to the police, they didn't want to hold a line. So you can't sit up here and say, like I said, you can't have it both ways. You can't say that you're against all this heavy policing and you want people to have health care and you want people to have, equality, be treated equally and all that. But then you tell your viewers to vote for said person that doesn't back or support any of those things and is corporate owned. You can't have it both ways. And that's why the movement never went further. That is why. Now a lot of people are sitting back and they're crossing their fingers and they're banking on to see if AOC runs for president. So then they can get more viewers with that election as well. It's so obvious. And to me, people can say whatever they want about me. Fine. Don't give a fuck. But the reality is I am not, you never build a show on a campaign. Never build a show on a campaign. And after the Bernie campaigns, it felt like to me, people were trying to reach for straws and like, okay, well, let me just jump on the Biden thing and support Joe Biden. And that's what quite a bit of them did. Made excuses for Biden, supported Joe Biden time after time after time. And it was obvious to me. It was audience capture. It was so obvious. So that's what a lot of this is really all about. Let's continue on a little bit more here.
Look, the Sunrise Movement was amazing when they sat in, Pelosi's office. AOC joined them there, but we needed to keep that level of pressure. That was one action. Let's get back to that.
Okay.
Look, so like, I'm just saying like that is, I feel like we sort of miss what works online and what gets eyeballs online for what actually could work in real life.
Part of what's frustrating, I think, for me is that I know it feels a little to me. I don't want to diminish the extent to which obviously some people were off-put by a tone issue. But I want to really be clear.
It's not a tone issue. It's like,
or the approach, whatever. I'm not trying to get lost in however you want to characterize it that way. But I don't want to pretend as though there were substantive arguments. When I debated Ben Burgess and Adam Gaffney and Natalie Shore on the Katie Halper show at the time, the arguments, this was like before, like even Jimmy Dore's tone was an escalation over time. This was over the course of maybe 3 months. This started around, I think, just before, during November of 2020, and then the vote was in early January. So two plus months. So the debate was nothing about Jimmy Dore. The debate was about how they thought substantively it was a bad idea for AOC to withhold her vote for Nancy Pelosi. And I don't want to allow, because I think it's way easier to defend one's opposition to this on the basis that like Jimmy Dore was mean and like that's a bad strategy, which I also, frankly,
no, it's even more.
Bree's being, kind of nice about it, but this is kind of how I see it, right? Not only did they say it was a bad strategy, but they also went on to say, like people like Majority Report also went on to say that if they were to force the vote, that Kevin McCarthy would become Speaker of the House. And that was not factually true. But I feel like it was intentional. I feel like it was intentional. And they were rewarded for that. AOC still goes on their show. I don't know. I don't trust a lot of people. You guys let me know. I don't trust a lot of people. And I've seen some things. And I honestly just think that a lot of this was intentional. The whole Kevin McCarthy will become speaker thing, I felt like that was on purpose. I don't feel like that was a whoops. I think I got that wrong. No, I felt like that was intentional. I distrust first, and you got to prove to me, and then I may trust later, but I distrust at first. And so those are some of the things that I kind of just saw along the way. I felt like it was intentional because they really wanted to maintain access to those people.
Even more than like for real though, like real talk. I realize that this is a sticking point for you, and I'm sorry that like it sucked for you and that people were like, that there was the wall that was put up. I'm sorry about that. And I, trust me, like, that is not like, that's not what went on with you and I, because we've never actually been on each other's shows. And this is the first time. So I just want to name that. But yeah, it's not just a like approach. It's also politics. Dore had been moving far to the right for a long time before then. And I don't know if you know that our history around him, you know, me gently criticizing him when he called my friend a CIA agent / Al-Qaeda because of his work in Syria, which if you have to, you know, remember, like a lot of this, like the stuff happened around the Syrian civil war, which, yeah, there were also, you know, hundreds of thousands of people being pulled out from rubble, and some folks online were saying that that was actually not happening, and anyone reporting on it was CIA. So like my shit goes back a lot deeper. So I like I gingerly was like, hey, don't do this. And then he was like, you know, in Venice, Italy, and then trolled me, and I was like, what are you doing? And then of course, like all of this was very clear. People who have worked with him, people who know him. So like the bedfellows you do make around a legitimate strategy, around a good strategy, does matter. And the kinds of coalitions we build do matter. So there needs to be some lessons learned on all sides here. If I'm openly saying, yeah, maybe hindsight, that, you know, was a good strategy. But of course, the kinds of people and the kinds of tactics, the people you throw.
So I'm just going to, you know, sort of wrap this up here because there's one other thing I want to show you. But the thing is this. I honestly feel like, and this is just my opinion, there's a lot of gatekeeping. And a lot of that gatekeeping that you see, particularly in YouTube media, I can't say independent media anymore, because as I've been a part of this, I've been finding out more and more that some of these people that I thought was independent are not actually independent. So I'm not even going to say independent media anymore. But apparently with YouTube media, the reality is this. You can agree or disagree with Jimmy's approach to force the vote or whatever. I really don't give a shit. What I do think, though, is that even if, let's take him completely out of it and say he wasn't a part of it, the gatekeeper mentality, particularly within the space, has been that if the idea is not started by TYT or said TYT, you know, founder, then the idea is not something that is going to be heavily promoted. Case in point, let's take politics out of it for a second. Politicians out of it for a second, which is what Force the Vote was really about. When it came down to the Medicare for All marches that went over 50 cities for the countries, why didn't Francesca and all the TYT people, why didn't they promote it? Why didn't they promote it? You see what I mean? So it's like, when we talk about organize and all the types of stuff, as someone who is an activist, has been a part of a lot of these organizing efforts, I'm here to tell you, to let you know right now, when it came to doing things on the ground, if it was happening under the Biden administration, a lot of these outlets did not want any part in it. They didn't want anything to do with it because Democrats were in power. This is important for people to understand. A lot of times they seem really tough when Trump is in office. But the moment that Biden won, all of a sudden, while people were still organizing for Medicare for all of a sudden people didn't want nothing to do. Don't do anything. They didn't, no, don't do anything. Don't try to. Democrats have the House. That's what it was really about. So, as I've said before, I think the personalities is a distraction. And again, I don't even know, like most of these people I have never met in real life, but I think the personalities is a big distraction and it prevents getting something done, right? So the reality is that the Democratic Party didn't want to do shit for the people, period. And that's because they're on the same team. Republicans and Democrats on the same team. They just do things in different way, but they still exist to maintain the status quo. Now, Francesca sits up there and says that third parties need to start from the ground up. Now, she's in California. Did she know that 78% of California Greens won their elections? Did she know that? See, this is what I'm talking about. People say start from the ground up. 78% of Green Party candidates won their elections. And they have different positions, like they're in city council, school board. As much as people complain about schools, you know, they're in school board. I interviewed a Green Party mayor on this show before. There are a couple of Green Party mayors throughout the United States. Now, they need to get other seats. Don't get me wrong. They need to get into Congress. They need to get some of these state legislator seats as well. So yeah, I'm not saying there isn't work that they need to do. I'm not saying that. But my thing is, you live again in California. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I said the same thing to Cenk Uygur when he came onto the show. I'm like, you're in California. Why aren't you guys talking about all the wins you've been able to get through ballot measures, right? Again, it's capture. That's why. So I don't know what else to say except for, I think my Wi-Fi is a little finicky. Oh, there it is. I don't know what else to say except for the fact that it's clearly obvious. And I'm going to say it again, and I'll say it like 1,000 times. I honestly don't think any movement should be led by podcasters. I think movements need to be led by the grassroots, but I do think that the podcasting space, we're where those people should be able to come to promote said action. And I love and I participate. I'll still be there participating with you, but I just don't think any movements need to be led by podcast personalities because they have something to lose or gain, because they have, a lot of them have that audience capture, and that's really what they're thinking about at the end of the day. And I'm sorry, but I've discovered a lot of fake people in this space. I'll be honest with you guys. I've discovered a lot of people. I'm telling you, a lot of just fakeness. And then you just start to see as time goes by how many people are doing these things because they actually care, and how many of them are doing it just because they want the numbers. You know, how many of these people are around when we do mutual aid? These people are nowhere to be found, most of them. Or they don't want to talk about it, or they don't want to promote it, right? That's how you know if people are serious or not. And now Bree's not one of those people. She actually promotes the stuff and has been there, whatever. But Francesca, TYT group, I get that Bree's trying to, I guess, have some type of, unity here on the left. But the problem comes in when people like Francesca, TYT, and that whole like stick. And I said this to Cenk himself. I told him as well, when we organize on the ground, you guys do not promote. And I'm not saying you got to get out there and organize with us, but when we reach out to promote said activities, which is on issues that you supported, you guys don't promote it. And that's a problem. And that's why we don't have big numbers. And that's on purpose. So when people talk about coalition building, and we need to build coalition, what you guys need to know, what Francesca was talking about, is not just about coalition. It's about certain people and certain personalities. And if you are deemed as someone that people say, oh, don't talk to that person or stay away from that person or whatever, even though they may be an activist fighting for the same things you are, that's what this is really about. It's one big clique. And if you don't kiss up to the Democratic Party and kiss up to certain people's ass, particularly in this space, they will not try to build coalition, period. Especially when it comes to the Black ones. Because if you notice, you don't really see too many Black podcasters in this so-called coalition that she's talking about. Think about why that might be. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.